Okay, Sharon, how you doing today?
Crystal, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. We're going to have a good time.
Yes, we are. We gonna have a good time, Sharon. It took me about 3 or 4 takes, but finally we got it together. It's Monday. You know how it is on Mondays. So how you doing today, Sharon? Where are we chatting from? Where are you at right now?
I am north of Seattle, and we've been having a lot of rain, but I see a little bit of sun out there today. Maybe I'll be able to take a walk and feed some biscuits to the dogs on my street.
Oh, that'd be nice. You know what? I took my walk earlier today. I took my dog out. I had my day planned. I got up this morning. I read my daily scripture, went to the gym and, did a couple of swim classes and took my dog for a walk. And, every day I'm learning how to plan my days. How about you? Do you plan your days when you get up in the,
Somewhat, somewhat. Before I get out of bed, Crystal, I like to say, what do I need to know today
okay.
to learn? And how are you going to dance with me today, God?
Right.
So,
Exactly.
so that leaves some room for some dancing to go on during my day.
Oh, that's nice. That is so nice. Yeah. I mean, I just realized that as I've gotten older, uh, it's, you know what? When you get over a certain, when you get older, life to me gets better. Would you say that? Okay, you're 77, okay? I'm 56. I mean, 57. Look at that. I can't even remember my age. Look at that. 57. And I just feel like life gets have gotten better as I got older.
I think it's because we have a more groundedness as we get older. I have never been consumed with what will people think, uh,
Right.
especially not as you get older, because we seem to have more of a centeredness. At least that's what my inner spark did for me, was giving me a centeredness
Mhm.
about expressing who I am. There's nobody like me, so the world is waiting for me to share. uh, they want to listen to me. I've got something to say, and yet I felt invisible my whole career. So
Mm.
I am blooming now.
Oh, that's nice. That is so nice to hear. So you started out, okay, tell the people, the audience, first of all, you used to work for Boeing. Is this Boeing, the airplane company? Boeing is who you used to work for? Now,
Yeah.
were you a flight attendant?
Oh no, Boeing, we make airplanes. So when you see airplanes flying in the sky, it might be one of us. There's a lot of our planes in the air. Yeah.
Okay, so okay, so you weren't a flight attendant. You actually put the plane together, helped put the plane together.
Yeah, yeah, I did. I hired in November. I mean, yeah, November in 2008, and they taught me how to be a machinist, power tools. I
Okay.
I'd grown up on a farm. I had milked cows and stacked hay, and and yeah. So I, I'm always kind of a possibility person. In fact, I explore my possibility. This is on the cover of my book, but uh, I I had hired in to be, well, I had a choice of either being a machinist or electrician, and they needed more machinists at the time I was getting trained.
Okay.
And so I was tall enough and big enough stature to handle some of the heavier jobs. And so I got trained as that. But shortly into my being on the airplane to build it, my manager asked if I would be interested in doing a provisioner job. And it was somebody that um, took the carts to the plane of parts that need to be installed and then bring the carts back and
Mm-hmm.
bring supplies out and so forth. And all I asked was, does it pay the same? It did. So
Right.
so I said yes, and it saved me from having to be a contortionist to install things on the plane, because it was brutal how your body gets contorted to stretched and you know,
Pulled all kind of ways. Yeah. I
yeah.
wouldn't think that that would be the type of job you would be doing. The first thing came to my mind when I saw that you used to work for Boeing was you were maybe a flight attendant, but you was doing some physical work there for Boeing.
Yeah, it was not uncommon at all when other peer reviewers said they had wore a thing on your to tell them how far they walked. Uh,
Right.
a 10 and 12 mile day was pretty normal for provisioners. You were
Okay.
all over the factory, yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. Wow. Oh. Well, not to say that, women can't do physical jobs. I mean, we can do physical jobs, but that was the first thing came to my mind when I saw you. I was like, okay, maybe she was a flight attendant. So how long did you do that? How long, or you're
Well,
retired? Are you retired from that job?
yeah, I retired in 2016, but one of my neighbor friends I've known for a good 20, 30 years, she told me before I walked in the door to hire, she said, "Hey, you can't get hired after 50 or 55, whatever it was." She knew somebody in human resources and knew they didn't hire older people. And I
Mm,
thought, well, they were actually giving an incentive to be hired then,
mm-hmm,
$3,000 to welcome you to the company.
mm,
And I missed that deadline. And a couple of the instructors said, that the people that had hired in for that incentive had already left. They
mm,
didn't stay very long. And so that's, to me, that's using the system for your own benefit. And I,
mm-hmm.
I don't
Well,
like
why
that.
did they leave? So they would take the $3,000 incentive and then leave the job? That don't make sense. Did the job pay good money at all?
Well, when you're first getting into the union, yeah, it's not that much. In fact, I had already worked a day job and then came and worked uh, at Boeing another job in the evening to learn to use the power tools and to be
Okay.
good at it. So
Right.
I had paid dearly to just get my foot in the door, um, working 16-hour days to make the grade. But I had a master's degree at the time, and every now and then somebody would catch me on the production floor and say, "What are you doing here with a master's degree?" Well, we needed jobs. It was 2008. A lot of dot coms were laying off people. So it was a matter of determination. And I
Mm-hmm.
was already 60 when I hired in the door.
Mm.
So I had spent, excuse me, I had spent 3 years delivering mail, and that
Okay.
had, hefty. I back stacking hay helped me have good strong shoulders for delivering mail. And you know it's positivity. What can you do with what God's given you?
Right, right. Well, with us women, we are multitask women. We can do almost any and everything. And I'm a hands-on learner. I'm one of those people. I don't like nobody standing up in front of me and trying to teach me something. Show me. I would rather do it. I'm hands-on. That's the type of learner I am. So I think that women could do almost anything if we're showed how to do it or if we're given the opportunity. But yeah, power tool, working with a power tool. I've seen men work with power tools. I don't see too many women doing it. So I applaud you for that, you
Thank you.
know.
Thank you.
So now, what are you doing now that you're retired? What have you been doing to keep yourself occupied and productive? Because
I
that's the conversation we about to get into.
yeah, excuse me. I started coaching class the week before I retired.
Mm-hmm.
And I had considered my master's degree is in behavioral science. And at Boeing, the next job I had after the power tools was to be an employee involvement facilitator. I
Mm-hmm.
like facilitation because that's where I'm kind of helping other people to expand and be successful and
Mm-hmm.
be their best. I love helping people be their best.
Mm.
Well, at Boeing and with all the union stuff going on, a lot of people would rather blame somebody else, the management, the supervision. And yet, in reality, they were kind of solving their own problems, kind of through the back door, and
Right.
and just not, if they wanted to give management a problem about it, they would. And in fact,
Mm,
I didn't appreciate the union at all because they usually twisted the truth to make it cynical and um, questioning what was the intention of the law or the rule or whatever. But I, and people often told me, you've got the hardest job at Boeing. Maybe so. I was empowering people to take problem solving down to the lowest level.
mm-hmm,
And yet, I like the challenge because when I could impress you with, oh, what are the possibilities?
mm,
What could you do with what you have? What
mm-hmm.
what is s- use our ingenuity for something good.
Right.
So I wound up being well, I worked until I was 69 there. And, but the week before I started coaching class. And the first thing they taught us, Crystal, was how to write our essence statement. Now, I've since renamed it to Spark or Inner Spark, or
Mm-hmm,
another word that people might understand is intrinsic motivation. What
mm-hmm,
flows from you naturally, your talents and your personality and your values. And what I learned that weekend was my how to write my essence statement. And we had to stand at the end of writing our statement in a circle and read our essence statement to each other. And I kind
mm-hmm,
of people coming around, the circle that they were kind of choking up a little bit.
mm-hmm,
What about? Well, when it came to my turn, nobody ever had asked me to define my soul before. That's what it felt like. And
mm,
here's what I read. I am precious jewel of wisdom. I am colorful collaborator, motivator, and learner. I
mm-hmm,
am tranquil, authentic, and pure inspirer. I light fires. And I want to light everybody's fire to know that have the confidence of what they came with naturally and what
mm-hmm.
makes their heart sing.
Right.
Then I want to open up that definition or that awareness to you that
Mm-hmm,
so you are confident to express your uniqueness because the world is waiting for you to share the reason you're here.
mm-hmm,
Now, 66% of the boomers or the retirees struggle with finding a new purpose in retirement.
mm,
I had heard at Boeing that, oh, there's people that put off retiring because they know they'll be dead in 3 years.
mm-hmm,
Oh, that hurt me when I was told that, and it's wrong. Well, yeah, it might take 2 years, 3 years for a couch potato to die.
mm,
I came back from being gone on a long weekend and immediately went out to water my plants because they'd been without water. And as I was approaching my patio here, oh, yeah, if they're not growing, they're dying. If we're not growing, we're dying.
mm,
Oh, yeah, it takes a while for couch potato to die. And I see all this free time in retirement being untapped potential. It's
mm,
waiting to be used. It's waiting to have a project that's so big that it calls them and reaches for their best. And I intend to impact 10% of the boomers around the world to
mm,
live from their spark, do something that's meaningful and has value to them because I feel like it's a little bit of heaven on earth.
mm,
Joy and the satisfaction of making a difference in either somebody's life or an organization or building something or leaving a legacy. The fulfillment and the better health and longevity comes with having a purpose and you're more productive. Help.
mm. You know what? It's funny you say that because it took me a long time to to find out what my purpose was, you know? I actually didn't find out what my purpose was in life until I experienced a tragic accident. And after this was about 3 years ago, and all these years I would work these different jobs and I wasn't happy, but I did the job because I had to, you got to pay bills, you got to, keep a roof over your head. But I was never happy in anything that I was doing as far as work wise. But after experiencing a tragic accident that I had 3 years ago, it put me to where I am right now, and that's podcasting. Uh, and I became a mental health advocate based on the fact that I had a lot of mental struggles throughout my life. And my mental struggles didn't start until the year 2000. But even then, I didn't know what my purpose was. I knew I had to figure out what mental health was. I had to learn about it because I was struggling with it. But I didn't find out what my purpose was until after the accident, because after the accident, which was very traumatic, that was more mental health issues on top of what I was already dealing with. So I experienced like PTSD for a short amount of time after the accident. Uh, and I experienced struggle with depression. So I invited a lady onto the podcast, and she is a mental health advocate, and we had a really good story, you know. And the story we talked about so much stuff, but it led me to where I am today. So I can relate to what you're talking about as far as finding purpose in your life. And sometimes you don't find it until after your 50s. I mean, it was after 50 years old is when I found my purpose, and I'm glad you brought that up, because especially people who are retired, people feel like me, I have to keep myself busy or I'll go crazy. I have to be busy. How about you?
I guess I'm busy, but in kind of a silent way. I like to learn and read a lot. And
Okay.
so read self-help books over the years, and the whole college was, I was always seeming like going to college, even nights or weekends. And
Mm-hmm.
but I I guess it was my way of hiding in some ways. I actually wanted to hide in my about 8, 10 years old because there was sexual abuse going on. I
Mm.
I felt like if I was obedient and got good grades and didn't rock the boat, that I would be safe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it wasn't until I probably retired when I realized that I was still invisible. Now,
Mm.
I had been like you. I had been diligent. I came to work. I got things done. Now, one of my favorite memories, it was only 3, 4 months after I retired that I found a webinar from the UK on how to have mental strength.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody talks about that. I'm going to listen to this guy. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
had conflicts with everything but the first day. So I listened to the first day, and he said, when you're facing a difficult challenge, maybe it's a meeting you need to go into and you're not sure how it's going to go, or you're meeting somebody and you're kind of nervous about how it'll go. And he said, well, first, uh, recall to mind a warm memory
Mm-hmm.
and hold it for 15 seconds and then go into your meeting and it'll go a lot better.
Right.
His example of a warm memory was uh, giving his little son a ride in an airplane that he was piloting. He had always wanted to learn to fly an airplane. So he showed us a picture of his son being in the back seat. And my memory was from third grade. Actually, it was second grade because I skipped second grade. So, but
Mm,
in the Christmas program, they asked me to be a reader. There were three readers, and I thought, well, how do you be a good reader, And so I looked around and who's in front of people and who's doing a good job. So I looked at the guy on the news and I looked at the preacher in the platform, and I
mm-hmm.
figured out that you need to speak up so people can hear you. You need to speak slow enough so they can understand you, and you need to look at your audience once in a while.
Right.
So after the Christmas program, I had a compliment or two, and it meant so much to me because they noticed I had taught myself and learned how to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
And I did go on in my career to do Toastmasters and Dale Carnegie. So that was out of my own, uh, not it's an I word, initiative, my own initiative. But for the rest of the career, I way down deep in my stomach, I felt invisible, not
Mm-hmm.
seen, not heard. And yet I often was sticking up for the person who was also not seen and heard, to give them a little bit of a voice for them.
Right.
And I would kind of be a little scared about doing something new. And I thought, well, I'm helping the people coming behind me. And
Mm-hmm.
that gave me a little bit more courage to speak up in
Right.
tough situations.
Well, take me back to your childhood. You said that you felt invisible, and this was because you experienced sexual abuse, you said?
Well, I wasn't the main victim. My older sister had a baby by my dad. Now,
Wait a
I
minute.
didn't
Say that again. Your older sister what?
had a baby by my dad.
Oh, wow.
And it had been going on for years.
So
Um,
your father had been sexually abusing your sister. Was this you and your sister, or was he abusing your sis, just your sister?
I don't know that we know the whole story, but there were times I had to masturbate him. And that was uncomfortable. And in fact, I've never married and never had kids. And that was of no interest to me. I was basically scared of men. Most men didn't interest me. They weren't, you know, um, I like to be challenged and stretched a little bit. And
Right.
most guys don't do that for me. And, but I yeah, I said hundreds of times, thank heavens he keeps his hands off me. And I was the only one in my family that was a learner, even before I started kindergarten. My mom had me drill my brother and sister on their flashcards. 2 plus 3 is 5. I
Mm,
knew my sister's third grade flashcards almost better than she did when I started first grade.
right.
And that enabled me to um, be a candidate for skipping a grade. And I was always glad I did, because those people behind me are more immature than I am.
Right. 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 So tell me about your, how many siblings is it? Is it you and your sister? Did you have any other siblings?
Yeah, I have a couple of younger sisters.
Okay.
The
So
older,
how many of you are in the family?
there were five of us kids.
Okay.
I was the middle one. That's another reason why people get invisible, is as a middle child. There's younger ones and the older ones, and those in the middle kind of get left out. I know my birthday is in November, so I had to often wait until Christmas for my birthday presents. It was too close to Christmas.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about, okay, your father. So he was sexually abusing not only you but your sister, and your sister had a child about your father. Now, is this her biological father? So she did have the baby?
Yeah, Crystal, it was one of those family secrets. I didn't actually know uh, the whole story until I was about 15 years later.
Okay.
And one of my sisters had just gotten married, and she tells me on her wedding day after the ceremony that I didn't know all there was to know about her and, well, the older sister and uh, her being moved to Wenatchee.
Mm-hmm.
And her husband said, "Don't go any further, don't go any further." And so when I felt strong enough to acknowledge what the rest of the story might be, I recall to mind having read her diary two, three times where she thought she was pregnant and what would dad think
Mm.
and wonder if it was going to be a boy or girl. And that had been buried. I completely forgot that I had snuck into her diary. So it was in fact a good thing in that
Right.
yeah, I brought it to my own light. And I'll never forget the day that called one of my friends from church and told her what I had realized. And she said, "Well, come on over, we'll have some tea and we need to talk." Well,
Mm.
come to find out years later, she had had sort of a similar situation. But we didn't talk about stuff like that very much then. And
Mm-hmm.
but I got the feeling that my parents had recognized that I was a more sensitive and aware kind of person. I feel like I had a strength of authenticity from a very young age that,
Mm-hmm.
I walked my talk. I wanted people to believe what I said and take it to the bank. And
Mm-hmm.
being a lifelong learner,
Yeah.
that wasn't what was, the rest of the people in my family. I was the only one that went to college. So them keeping some of the ugly truth from me was their way of protecting me. And um, they say that people that struggle with incest, they either become promiscuous or they put on weight to shield themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I put on weight. I was 244 pounds by the time I retired, and
Right.
I I didn't want to have to deal with the sexual attraction of being beautiful because how do you handle that?
Right.
So, and books don't hurt.
Right. That's true. So, where was your mother in all of this? Did your mother have any idea that was this her husband? Uh, Did she have any idea that her your father was sexually abusing you or your sister?
She seemed to have played dumb. And I say that because one of my classes in my master's program, it was the first class. In fact, I think I had to go to Spokane from Seattle, and they lived halfway on the way to Spokane. So I was supposed to take two class, a two or three per page paper, talking about significant life events.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time, I think I was over 40, and I knew enough that if I didn't mention the incest in the paper, I would be denying it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, what do you say? Because I really hadn't dealt with it at all. I'd read about it, basically, and it seems like maybe one class
Mm-hmm.
uh, in psychology or something might have touched on it. But I decided to read that paper to mom. And okay, do I even read that part, two sentences about the incest? And her response was, "Oh, that's what you call it. We didn't talk about it."
Mm-hmm.
Um, so her mom had died when she was 8.
Mm-hmm.
So her understanding and how she handled, the sexual part of life, I don't know. There was five of us, and I think they had married in 1943, and Dad was getting off, going to war, and so you hurry up and get married or on his leave home. So how much she was aware, I don't know, but I was thinking a couple days ago of the morning that she got us all out of bed, and something must have come to a head because she had us all outside in our pajamas voting on whether we thought Dad should leave or stay.
Mm-hmm.
This was on 100-acre farm, and how do you vote? There was implications of why we were being asked to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So she had had enough strength to get other people involved, kids. How do kids make decisions like that? And
Right.
of course, in my spirit, I wanted to, um, of course, get him out of here. He doesn't belong here. That there needs to be some consequences about what's going on here.
Right.
But you're running a farm, and so we all said yes, we thought he should stay and basically live with it. And I don't know how old I was at the time or how my sister was, uh,
Right.
but yeah, it was a kind of a momentous decision for a child,
Right. It's like you had to make an adult decision
Oh, yes.
instead of the adult making the decision for you.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sorry to hear that. I really am sorry to hear that. I hear a lot of stories of, children being sexually abused and sometimes women stand in the relationship for financial reasons instead of protecting the child and making that decision for the child. Or, just I hear a lot of stories. And this is the first I've heard where the father impregnated the daughter. I know you know now that Donald Trump wants to put a ban on abortion. And I think about the fact that him wanting to put a ban on abortion would affect so many children or daughters or granddaughters who might find themselves in the same situation that your sister went through. You know what I mean? Like being forced to keep the baby. I think women should be able to have a choice as to whether or not they want to keep a child if they were raped by a rapist or a relative. You know what I mean? So what you just told me just brought me back to Donald Trump wanting to put a ban in certain states. How do you feel about that?
Well, I've heard enough people that were so desirous of having kids and not being able to. My nephew, they went through a lot of expense and some surgeries to try to get pregnant. And they were at their last chance of having kids when she was from Vietnam, and so she was getting some treatment there, but she also had gotten some treatments here with like endometriosis, and
Mm-hmm.
polyps were a problem. But they were practically a point of having to resort to adoption to have kids,
Mm-hmm.
and they finally got pregnant with uh, in vitro IVF.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they had a boy and a girl, and they are 10 months old now.
Mm-hmm.
But they went through a lot. There's people that so desirous of having kids. I believe there's a home for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
May not be your home. Okay, so when I asked my sister a little bit later as to what was another story or two from her, she's told me about standing at the adoption counter to give the boy up for adoption. And they asked her, do you know who the father is, or who is the father? And she wanted to point at him and say, it's him, it's him, it's him. But again, you don't do that to your parent.
Right.
It might have been different if he hadn't been standing there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But years later, my brother did try to find this stepbrother and was unsuccessful.
Mm-hmm.
When he told me about having done that, he says, I'm starting to understand what it was like to be a woman in our family.
Mm-hmm.
And that was such a deep, powerful expression. In fact, um, what's this? I just called to say I love you. He started calling me about every 6 weeks to just to say I love you in a way of his helping to heal the family. And
Mm-hmm. So later on down the line, did you guys attempt to seek therapy? Did the family try to come together and seek therapy? I mean, or 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 your sister?
I don't know exactly. She was her husband was on in the military, and so they either lived on the base or near the base a lot. So she had availability of being promiscuous. I don't know how much she did, but excuse me. But she did. Um, she, I would say no to the to your question.
Mm-hmm.
I asked my one of my younger sisters if there how much it had impacted her or if it did, and she told me about um, when she was about 8 and Dad was bringing her home from a vacation Bible school, and he kind of approached her about being promiscuous with her. And
Mm-hmm.
I never did ask her the rest of the story
Mm-hmm.
until 20, 30 years later, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of got shot down and say, she turned it back on me and said, I thought you got over that a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So she she turned the tide and didn't answer. And yet she's been on disability for 20, 30 years now with rheumatoid arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
Her
Mm-hmm.
trauma, I think, is stuck in her body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not able to, she's not willing to talk about it.
Right, right. So you wrote a book. Tell me about the book and what inspired you to write this book.
Well, I have always tried to be spiritually obedient. You know, when I feel it's time to do something, um, then I try to figure out how. And so this was during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and um, oh, I used a lot of the stories from my podcast guest in here. I like to help people think outside the box. So
Okay.
it's possible. All right. So one of the stories that one of my favorite in the book was Joyce Meyer. Joyce Mayer.
Mm-hmm.
She had felt she was about 55 and she felt like her heart needed to be expanded. And so she planned for 2 or 3 years to do community service projects around the world.
Okay.
She's been a real estate gal here in Seattle. And so she found places that would allow others to come in and donate time as a volunteer. But in like she was at a baboon sanctuary and helping baboons be protected and safe, or
Mm-hmm.
elephants and baboons, no baboons and elephants. Anyway, there's several experiences like that, and she's taught English to Chinese college students. And
Mm-hmm.
she Road elephants. Oh, lions was another one. So
Mhm.
she wound up writing a book about her trip, uh, and she each place she would land, she'd spend a month there because she says I'm not a very good tourist. I want to know about the country and know what makes it tick,
Mhm.
and some of their government policies and stuff.
Right.
So she had stretched her wings, Oh, and she got to be called Mama because a lot of the people that do the kind of thing she was doing were right out of college. They were finding themselves. So
Mhm.
she would often make chocolate chip cookies for them, and so she got this favorite name of being called Mama. But another story was a guy that is down the street from me, quite an artist, and has done thousands of pictures of first responders who we lost during their courageous dedication to the work they were doing, either in the military or first responders,
Mhm.
and how it was a way of them them to have closure on having lost their loved one. It's
Right.
a gift to the family, and he would give. In fact, he has a foundation where people help him foot the costs of doing these for the neighbors, for the world, actually. So my book is about helping you. Okay, so another principle that came up while I was podcasting was this gal had been gone through a nasty divorce, and she had a coach that told her, "Well, to help you get over your pain, do something so big that it overshadows the pain." And he
Mhm.
at the time was working on a project in Tibet, building houses um, for people that didn't have much money. And so he said, well, would building a house in Tibet help solve your divorce pain? No, no, I don't think so. That's not going to be big enough. So
Right.
10 homes, no, that doesn't stretch me enough. You want to building 100 homes in Tibet, this single divorced lady. And
Mhm.
it turned out that she set up a foundation called Unstoppable, and that foundation is now partnering with communities in South Africa to bring them schools, build schools for them, to bring them water, and
Mhm.
now even branching out into helping them have jobs and productivity to teach hospitality for when there's people that come in as
Mhm.
tourists, or house healthcare,
Right.
or maybe being a stewardess on airplanes, kind of thing. So her Unstoppable Foundation is ripple effect all over the world with having reprocessed the pain from her divorce.
Mm.
So
Wow.
So finding purpose as its fulfillment, Crystal, the answer to your question is I walk people through, I consider it a do-it-yourself
Mhm.
manual for finding your purpose. So I'm
Right.
asking you questions all throughout at the end of each chapter to say, how can some of this point that I'm making with these stories apply to you?
Mhm.
And by the end, you might have figured out with all the answers that you've dug up for how it applies to you to find um, some summary of what your purpose could look like.
Mhm.
It doesn't exactly go into helping you find your essence. I make you hungry for that because
Okay.
it um, it is I hadn't yet developed my how to teach the essence part, but now I have, and it is in fact on the Great Discovery platform called Discover Your Spark, Rekindle Your Joy. And it's a platform that can translate any course into like 120 languages. So it can be a global message.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because, that's interesting because, a lot of people who are over 50 or 60 years old who experience divorce, or people who are widows, or they find themselves and or single, find themselves in a situation to where some people become couch potatoes, you know. But it's important, I think, to find your purpose, because it keeps you alive. It keeps you wanting to keep going.
Yeah.
It just gives you something to look forward to, and I'm retired myself. And actually, this is my purpose. This is what keeps me going. This is, just being able to help other people find healing through, this platform. And because a lot of people struggle with, mental health issues. And a lot of it comes from, childhood situations. It could come from trauma. It could come from injuries. It could come from an accident. You
Yeah.
can experience trauma all kinds of ways. I mean, through, sexual abuse or physical or mental abuse. You know what I mean? All of that is trauma. All of that affects people mentally. So I just find that it's important for people not to get stuck in that situation, and to find some sort of healing to where they can, unite with their purpose. And it's important for us to do that. It took me years to do it. I didn't know where it was going to come from, but, once you find that purpose, it's so fulfilling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember recalling that one of the classes in my master's program, one of the new students that came in for the new quarter had in fact hardly any hair.
Mm-hmm.
You could practically count the hairs on her head.
Mm.
I think with her came she what had her trauma had been, she'd been lost at sea. I think it was for 8 days with this guy. I think it had been his boat,
Mm-hmm.
but to not be found and recovered had cost her her hair. And I remember she actually left the course after that first weekend because she was not strong enough yet
Mm-hmm.
to forgive or to let go of something that I got the feeling that usually in a situation like that, you'd kind of bond with whoever you're with.
Mm-hmm.
And that had maybe happened for a week or two. And then, she pulled back. So the being being both strong enough and courageous enough and willing to transform this possible failure into a learning experience, she was not there yet. And
Mm-hmm.
yet we tried to love on her. And I think to some degree, I haven't let love in my heart that much either.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt for her because life was hard, and going through that and yet living to tell about it was
Mm-hmm.
not something she was yet ready to move on from.
Yeah, yeah. Some people can find themselves stuck. I found myself stuck in one at one point, and then I had to stop being the victim, you know. I had to come out of that victim mentality, and that's what helped me uh move forward, you know. Um and because if you don't move forward and become stagnant, you lose so much of yourself that you can actually share with other people, through your experience. And everybody has a story that can help someone else, so I had to stop being that victim, and that's what helped me, get to the next level even after my accident. And I kept thinking about how it happened. And, I kept thinking about how could someone do this to me? Or, I kept finding myself, I found myself not trusting of people or trusting of anyone. And I had to come out of that because, we could create these stories in our mind that's not real, you know? And you might think we might think these things are happening to us, but they're really not. It's, you just put these stories in your head. As far as like me, after I had came out of my accident, I was like, it was a struggle for me. It was like I just felt like somebody was trying to hurt me. And in reality, nobody was trying to hurt me, but that's what I thought because of what had happened to me, you know? So, yeah, you just have to, it's a struggle. It takes work, it takes therapy, it takes counseling, it takes support, hugs. Yeah. It takes all of that, to come out of that victim mentality.
Yeah, I'll never forget this. A couple Sundays, I started realizing that if I gave hugs, I would get hugs. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I would sometimes do that after church, and give hugs. And I remember a couple of times that I felt so fragile
Mm-hmm.
that if somebody came up behind me and said "boo," I'd wind up on the floor like a cracked egg. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I was so tender. And yet one of my favorite memories that example of that, my uncle had joined me for lunch down here in town, and I believe it was after church, and
Mm-hmm.
I told him our family secret,
Mm-hmm.
and he was kind enough to tell a couple of stories that they had wondered what was happening or what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And after outside the restaurant, he gave me a big hug, and I said, "This is the real kind, isn't it?" And he says, "Yeah, sure is." In fact, he had also been somewhat abused. His stepmom had found a reason every day for him to get a spanking.
Mm.
How and yet somehow he had let that go. Well, that next week he died.
Mm.
He had a trucking accident on the way to California, and there was a storm that he was going through, and he wound up putting his truck into the median between on the freeway, and several things had been damaged in his body, and he passed away. And yet I had that gift of his hug
Mm.
before he died.
Right. Wow. Wow. Oh, wow. What a story. Uh, could you share with the audience where they can purchase your book if they want to pick it up?
Sure,
Um,
sure. It is on Amazon. If you'd like a autographed copy, you can send me an email at Sharon Rolph, Sharon at effortlessvitality.org, and I have a small stash here at the house. But I also have on Instagram, I am Sharon underscore Queen of Courage, and they're just small vignettes, 2, 3, 4 minutes to try to encourage you on a daily basis because we all need courage.
yes.
And let's see. Then I post quite frequently on Facebook, trying to build people up and give them something to think about. I loved helping you think.
Right.
And let's see what else. Oh, I have quite a few of my videos, both podcasts and my short vignettes. Okay, so here's what I make these little blocks, and um, probably made about 500 of them. So this one says, "Never underestimate the power of a
Plant
planted
his
seed."
seed. Mm.
I feel like what I'm doing is planting seed. And if I'm planting a seed of possibility in your heart, yay, because there's too many things that try to discourage you instead of encourage you. And
Mm-hmm.
I I find value in just planting seed because you don't know where that seed is going to grow.
That's true.
And that's where the spiritual hope and and faith comes into play because I do what I can, you do what you can. And in fact, that's the way to create new knowledge. I'm a certified knowledge manager. So if I'm sharing what I know, you're sharing what you know, the possibility of new knowledge erupts.
Yeah.
Magic.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. You gotta pass it on. It's you got when you have all that wisdom and that knowledge and all that information, and like you said, you plant a seed, and you never know who you're gonna inspire or whose life you're gonna change. I might not meet a person whose life I might change, but at least they can have that with them and say, man, it was because of this person that I was able to do this, or I mean, there's a young man that I started following on YouTube, and he's become so encouraging to me to the point where I just kept watching all his episodes. He's so disciplined, very disciplined. He's a runner, and let me see if I could find his name, but he's young, and he lives in LA, but I think right now he moved back to, I think it was Dallas or something like that, because that's where his family is from. And he got tired of traveling back and forth from LA to Dallas, Texas. So he decided to moved back to Texas to be close to his family. But this kid is so inspiring because he's so organized. He's very disciplined. His mindset is just, and it's funny because you don't have to take a lot of wisdom from older people. A lot of times you can find wisdom in younger people. And I found so much. I mean, he just motivated me he taught me how to be more organized, and how to plan my day rather than just getting up and trying to figure out what I'm going to do. It just makes life a whole lot easier when you do it that way. But it's been a pleasure. I just wanted to share that with you real quick. But this gentleman, let me see if I can find him for the audience who might want to follow him on YouTube. He has his own. His name is Carlos Harris Jr. And he's on YouTube. And like I said, I've been following his channel. Um, he's an entrepreneur. He's a runner. He runs all the time. But his pages, his channel is so encouraging. So I do watch him, usually when I find things. So you just never know. You just never know whose life you're gonna change. I just try to pull it up on my phone, but you just never know whose life you're gonna change just by sharing your life or sharing your story.
Well, yeah, I just
Yeah.
come to mind that in May I wrote a course called Make a Marvelous Transition into Volunteering. Now that's great advice for retirees because it helps fill your days. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I had a guest on my podcast, AARP past president for Washington State, and he had laid out 9 things that are good that happen when you volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
And the uh, one of the principles I bring out is how there are people that are watching your life. You have no idea how your life is talking without saying any words,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that often when you're young and you're volunteering, it can either turn into a job because you're willing to do something for simply the good of humanity. But
Mm-hmm.
people might, oh, look, they come when they're supposed to. They show up. They're reliable. They're honest. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, let's give them something else to do that we'll actually pay them for.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some principle. Well, and the reason I wrote a course on volunteering was I remember when I was about 14 that mom had made a point to say when you bless someone else, like give them a loaf of bread, or we had cows, so we would give them a loaf of butter.
Right.
And when you bless somebody else's life, you get blessed too.
That's true.
Volunteering feels good. What a good reason to do volunteering. And a
Right.
couple of my uncles did quite a bit of volunteering when they retired. And I just think it's so wholesome. I volunteer every week down here at the food bank delivering
Mm-hmm.
groceries to four families that either can't get out or they're a caregiver or they're maybe raising their grandkids, or I believe one of them, the grandkid was deaf, and
Mm-hmm.
but every now and then he'd come out and help me carry the groceries in. And I remember one day he had red on and I had red on, so I said, look, we're the same, we got red. And yet he loved helping me carry the groceries in. It was kind of fun. And
Yeah.
the law of reciprocity also comes into play with that,
Mm-hmm.
because about 6 weeks ago, one of the ladies that I deliver to, I I was commenting about her plants by her front door. I
Mm-hmm.
love lavender. She has a lavender plant there, and so wait, I thought she was going to show me some more flowers. No, she showed me her two plum and prune trees in a yard that was overflowing with plums. And she wouldn't let me go until she got a box and had me take some home with me. Well,
Mm.
that's the reciprocity that comes into play. And you
Right.
don't think that much about it, except sometimes when you're in church,
Right.
or have parents that believe in helping other people too. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Sharon, it was a pleasure having you on as a guest, and I thank you so much for sharing your story. A lot of times it's not easy to talk about a lot of the things that you go through as a child or, the trauma and things that you experience. And, this is a safe space to I always say this platform is a safe space for people to come on and just talk about anything because we need to have more conversations like this. We need to take the stigma out of mental health, you know, um, to whereas we need to make it more normal, to talk about a lot of things rather than hold on to things. It's a relief, when you release those things.
well, here's another story that was so powerful in my life and I think has made such a difference. And it's my answer to having mental strength. And so when I moved down to Tampa, Florida, and had such a hard time making new friends, well, I had um, used the scriptures in First John, I mean Joshua 1 and 2, but
Hmm.
I think I left out the part of the story that I started stomping my foot and saying, I refuse to live my life based on fear. Fear is a misuse of imagination. You
Yeah.
know, we've got ingenuity for building things and making things better, not to. Fear is spinning your wheels and going nowhere. You're still in the same spot you were in. And
Yeah.
one of the lessons I learned at Boeing was if you can't solve it and it's not your responsibility, oh well,
Mm.
walk away. You know,
Right.
why worry about it?
That's true.
So I think it took years off of my appearance because I refused to live my life based on fear.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel the same way. I refuse to live my life in fear too. You know, um, because you'll find yourself not being able to experience life to the fullest if you live in fear. So you
Does
cannot,
stuff to your body,
yeah, yeah,
down.
yeah, yeah, that's true. So yeah, you can't live in fear. One thing you cannot do is you would never know what you're capable of if you don't go out and take risk and, do things that you might not normally do, and I'm not perfect. I'm still working on some things in those areas, but it just takes time. And I finally become more confident with being in front of a camera, and even having this podcast and just speaking. A lot of people wouldn't even want to do something like this because the people don't want to be in front of a camera, but because you worry about what people are going to think, but now I'm not in that situation where I worry about what people think. And I don't think I ever really did worry about what people think, to be honest with you. Um, I just do what I do, and because I always looked at it like this: if you don't like what a person is doing, you don't have to watch it, you don't have to look at it, you don't have to read it, so but you should still go and do what it is that you feel like you might not even want to do in life, so it's important to, you can't live in fear at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I started a loneliness to resilience community to help heal the loneliness. I had read Vivek Murthy's book last year together,
Mm-hmm.
and he was the one that woke me up to the fact that he says feeling invisible is a form of loneliness.
Mm.
I'd kind of bragged about not having to ever deal with loneliness. And
Mm-hmm.
he's calling feeling invisible lonely.
Mm.
So I've been doing it now like 14 months,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not sure if I'll keep doing it, but I've all of a sudden on LinkedIn, I'm connecting with a lot of veterans. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
welcome people that veterans who often struggle with suicide and depression and loneliness to
Mm-hmm.
come and walk that journey from being lonely to resilient. This
Right.
month we're dealing with how does authenticity relate to loneliness.
Mm.
I was shocked at what I found at how much it relates to how much you're being true to yourself and speaking your honest truth
Mm-hmm.
and realizing I remember a long time ago somebody talking about how we slice truth depending on how you can handle it. You know, if
Mm.
you're telling your girlfriend something, will you
Right.
tell your mom the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
No, mom might react in a different way, so we might slice the truth for her
Mm.
differently.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, one of my friends right now is struggling with sadness and depression. And and he said, I get frustrated with people saying, "How you doing? How you doing? How you doing?" You know, he goes to church a lot. And, well, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. But that's not his truth.
Mm.
So the willingness to show up and be seen and be vulnerable
Mm.
with your truth
That's true.
is
It's
uh,
very important. Yeah.
it turned out he has done something different this last week that might be cracking that door open to having
Mm-hmm.
a new future instead of being stuck in their fine, I'm fine.
Stuck
That's
in
what
their pain and
I
trauma or whatever. Yeah, a lot of people do that. They get it was funny you said that because the gentleman I had on my podcast, he spoke about that. He spoke about the fact that he struggled with PTSD, and he said there was a point where you know he didn't speak his truth. People would say, "How you doing?" "I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine." But deep down inside, he really wasn't fine. And we have to make that normal too, that it's okay not to be okay. You don't have to be fine all the time. Because we have to come to terms with what we're really feeling. You know what I mean? Because it's only temporary. You know what I mean? It's temporary. You don't have to be stuck there. And and that's something I wanted to throw out to the audience, that it's okay not to be okay. If you're not okay, If you're down, if you're going through something and you don't feel comfortable talking to, certain people, go to a professional. I always suggest people go to a counselor or a mental health advocate or a therapist or a psychologist or whatever. Go somewhere where you feel comfortable, but at the same time, you're also talking about what you're dealing with. And we have to make that a normal thing that it's okay not to be okay. Yep.
Yeah,
So,
I, I pulled out a block here that I haven't talked about that much, but it might be a place where you might start feeling like, well, I could talk about that, but I can't talk about this other thing. These are questions
mm-hmm,
that John Maxwell has in one of his leadership books, and it asks, what makes me sing? Well, if you're sad and depressed, that might be a hard question, but you might have your favorite song now. My One of my favorite songs is "You Raise Me Up" by
mm-hmm,
Josh Groban. I probably played that hundreds of times. It's been quite a while, so I might need to dig it out again. What
right,
makes me cry? Now, what makes you cry might be a baby,
mm-hmm,
or an animal getting hurt or something. What makes and that might be easier to talk about because it's not you specifically, but it's cracking that door open just a little bit.
mm-hmm,
Uh, because I say when I feel vulnerable, it's kind of I think of it as a magical moment to be vulnerable and share
mm-hmm,
my truth and live to tell about it. So it might make it easier for you to talk about your truth.
mm-hmm,
Oh, they didn't condemn her, they didn't make fun of her, they didn't um, change the subject,
mm-hmm,
but miracles can happen because that's we find things in common that we
mm-hmm,
didn't know before.
right,
Okay, what makes me dream? That should usually be something easy to talk about. What makes me excel?
mm-hmm,
You probably have talents in IT or social media or playing a trombone that
right,
invisible, but
right.
you're still excelling. And what makes me feel different? Now we're starting, I mean, the culture is making it a whole lot easier now to be expressing what makes me different and it being okay. But it's just taken us decades to get there.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, that is true. But wow, we covered so much. There's some good. I just want to thank you again for coming on and sharing your story. And I'm sure your story will get someone else to open up and talk about some things that they might be holding on the inside. So it was a pleasure having you on, Sharon. And you said that people could get your book on Amazon and
Yes.
okay.
And
And
on my
give them the
book,
title of your book again.
Fresh Courage in Retirement, but it's good for any age. Um, Finding purpose, essence, and fulfillment. And here's another block that I feel so strongly about. When you see what you're here for, you suddenly find yourself on stage in a play written expressly for you.
Wow.
I've heard a couple of actors. I think Cicely,
Cicely Tyson.
yeah, I believe somebody wrote a movie for her.
Mm-hmm.
What a feeling that must be to realize you can be yourself and bloom and blossom and um, own who you are when
That's
you're
true.
on stage or something. And that's what I want everybody to find and feel, and I'd love to help you with it. And by
Mm.
the way, my loneliness to resilience, there's a link on it on my webpage, SharonRolph.com. Now it's also linked to effortlessvitality.org. Either way, you can find the link to loneliness, join the loneliness community and talk about where you are in your becoming resilient. the next step beyond resilient is belonging someplace,
Hmm.
belonging in a family, in a tribe that loves you just the way you are.
That's right. That is so true. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Wow. What amazing episode this has been, Sharon. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I
I
really
appreciate
appreciate it. And for the audience who's watching, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. It's important. Subscriptions mean a lot to me because the more subscribers that subscribe to the channel, the more I could get more the people like Sharon to come on to the podcast. But don't just subscribe. I want you to watch the episode. That's where all the meat and potatoes is at in the episode. So, uh, stay tuned for another episode of Let's Talk About This. And Sharon, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's planting seed, everywhere we know, find plant seed.
Plant seeds. That's what it's about.
All right.